Hello, everybody, and welcome back to One Chuff at a Time. I'm one of your hosts, Master of the Lemons, a.k.a. Lemmy.
I'm Ron Dog. I'm one of your hosts.
Nice.
Hello, I'm Crimson2091. My real name is Henry, and and the fact that that's also a Thomas character is purely coincidental.
Oh, good. I wasn't sure.
That. I don't think I buy it.
Yeah, I trust it. I mean, that's okay. But which was named after which in the hypothetical where
Henry? Well, the Henry from the Railway series came like 60 or so years before me.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
I would say I was named after him.
You know, that's
You're
a really
Audrey ripped you off then.
that's
no,
pretty
my
rational.
parents ripped Audrey off actually. But,
well, you know, it was a really nice move of him not to sue your parents for that.
Yeah, well, he was dead. He died 2 years before I was born, so...
I mean, that would help in the not suing. Okay, I take it back. You know, we can't actually judge his morality. Maybe he's suing you from the beyond.
Maybe.
Yeah. Anyway, so today, we're going to be talking about customs. Just in general, in every way, shape, and form. I think that's really good conversation fodder is just, you know, how do we make, you know, custom models? What do we like to make customs of? What are customs that we've thought about making and scrapped, you know? So, let's see where this takes us.
So, on the subject of customs, I feel like, just in general, like, for all of us here, the way we've made customs has changed so much, right?
Yeah.
Like, all of us have different techniques now. At least, I don't mean, like, you just got into 3D printing and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, not relatively recently, but recently
well,
enough.
honestly, yeah. I mean, I'd say that if we're looking at, like, you know, I mean, I've been like known to the Thomas community making Thomas videos since like 2016. Technically, my channel is like from 2011, but it was like a Cars channel back then. So I count 2016 as the year I entered the Thomas fandom, really. Or at least entered like the TWRC. Like I knew about the fandom at large a lot longer. But the point is, like, if you go back and look at the way that my work has evolved, like, yeah, I mean, it's only been in the last like 2 years that I've started 3D printing stuff at all. That's a pretty small slice of the pie. So, I mean, we're constantly changing. You know, I'm constantly changing. You know, and I mean, I think that's part of what makes it interesting is like seeing what that evolution is. Like, I mean, Ronnie, when I met you, you didn't do HO stuff like at all, at least that I knew of. And then you pretty quickly, like, you know, that became like your thing, you know. I mean, now you've refined it to the point where you're making really, you know, just beautiful stuff.
And it's expensive.
So we go from different slices of the same pizza from the last episode to slice of the pie in this episode.
That's true. We don't
I
say
just wanted
pizza
to
in this
point that
episode.
out.
It'll be
Wait
cake next time.
Pizza pie, though.
No.
Yeah, that's
we
true.
don't look. If we want to have like if we want to have a long and fruitful podcast, all right. We can't mix them together. How many things have slices exactly?
Next episode, that will be our topic. But anyway,
What foods have slices in them? That's
let's focus.
Topic
We'll focus on the
everyone's
task
interested
at hand this episode, which is
You're right.
customs. One of my most recent customs I made was Lemmy was actually at my house with Rudy Productions, and I made a ghost engine where I just used like some Imaginarium like off-brand engine.
Oh,
and
yeah.
painted it white for a ghost
Yeah.
engine.
How many coats did that take?
Like I think I only used like one, honestly, because it wasn't really that big of a deal. I just wanted it to look white like a ghost, and then when it was being used in the episode, it was transparent, you know, so it didn't.
Right.
I don't think it mattered that much. But I guess I guess my most popular I mean, I'm not a huge custom maker. It's not something I do all the time, but definitely by far my most popular custom I've made is the Union Pacific Big Boy.
Oh yeah.
And I made it like 5 or so years ago, and it's one of my more popular videos on my channel. Definitely my most popular like custom video I've made, and all it was is like I mean, it's not intricate by any means. It's like I sawed 2 old style Gordons, like not perfectly in half, but to the point where the engine was long enough. Used 2 streamlined Emily chassis for the like 3-wheel bogies.
Wait, I didn't realize it was 2 Streamlined Emily chassis.
Yeah.
So did you deliberately buy 2 Streamlined Emilys?
Yeah, I did.
Because I was gonna say, who the hell has 2 Streamlined Emilys just lying around? Like,
No, I bought them specifically for that.
There was a time when they were kind of, they were easier to come by. Too,
that's
wasn't
true.
there?
Yeah, because no one wanted
This was
them.
like, I bought them in like 2018. So, yeah, obviously that's a while ago. And so because of that, the big boy that I made has 6 wheels, and the big boy has 8 driving wheels, and I couldn't tell you how many times on my in my videos with whether it's the custom video I made or the Rails of the West episodes, how many people in the comments say, actually, it's more like a Challenger, because a Challenger has 6 driving wheels.
Dude!
Which is the Challenger was the engine before the big boy. They look pretty similar, except
wheel arrangements are different.
Well, I'm sure there's other differences than just this, but the main difference being the Challenger has 6 driving wheels, while the big boy has 8.
Can I just gush about how I get so annoyed by comments like that. Like, because the thing is, like, Wooden Railway, like, the whole point of it is really to simplify, like, the real designs. Like, that's the beauty of it. Like, you could, and look, some people do go and give Wooden Railway engines realistic wheel arrangements. Like, I've definitely seen a lot of Gordons that genuinely have, like, 12 wheels, you know, on the locomotive part, right? And, I mean, you can do that, and you can even make it look good, but I think a lot of the time it ends up making the engine look kind of too long, and it kind of sacrifices the proportions. And so I think that, like, it's really, really elegant what you did, Henry, because I think that, the Wooden Railway Sam, that looks kind of gross and ungainly. Like, the bogies are too small, the gap between them is too big, and it's not long enough. He's, like, a little bit longer than Gordon. Mm-hmm. So you did, I think, the right middle ground, where it's kind of like how, you know, you take Gordon, who's this big, strong engine that's got, you know, 6 driving wheels, 12 wheels total on the locomotive, and then you reduce him to, you know, 2 4-wheel bogies. And it's like, I think it's kind of the same ratio with, like, a big boy, is you take it and you reduce it to just 2 big 6-wheel bogies, which makes it obviously much bigger than any other character in the range. But still, it's like, you know, it's Wooden Railway. It's simplified. It doesn't look out of place. It looks like big for a Wooden Railway engine. It doesn't break things, you know.
And that's one of the things I had in mind when I was set in my mind that I wanted to make a Wooden Railway big boy for this, like, American series I want to do, is that when I was making it, I knew that I couldn't just use 4-wheel bogies, like. Because when Sam came out in, like, 2015, there were a few people saying that, like, it, you know, Sam's cool and all, but I think it would have been better if they used, like, 6-wheel bogies, because that's what Sam is, a huge American engine, one of the bigger ones. Maybe not as big as the big boy, but it would have been cool if they utilized 6-wheel bogies for him.
Right.
And that's what made me go, like, okay, Streamlined Emily's, that's perfect, because I didn't want to get, like, Connor and Caitlin's, because those are engines that I'd actually want to have in my collection that would serve a purpose.
Streamlined Emily, you wouldn't want to butcher those, yeah.
Yeah, Streamlined Emily didn't really, and, like, the fact that she was made into Wooden Railway model was, like, crazy to think about to begin with, but it ended up working for me because I was able to use it for Big Boy.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's not that many engines that have those 6-wheel bogies. I think there's Murdoch, Arthur, Connor, Caitlin, and Streamlined Emily, and probably a few others that escape me at the moment. But, you know, not that many, you know, but it's a really cool thing. I've implemented it on a lot of models over the years. And this is something I have to think about a lot. And it's something I honestly take a lot of, I give a lot of thought, is how to design engines within the framework of Wooden Railway, because I'm not inherently, like, a Wooden Railway person. Like, I I kind of embraced Wooden Railway back in 2016 because I discovered that there was this tightly knit community with all these traditions that was really cool. And it's like the whole notion of like, oh, you could do a remake, or you can do like a crossover review, or you could do like all these skits, or do a series, or like a movie. Like there's all these like very clear, like these are avenues you could take creatively. And I think in the broader community, it's not quite as well defined. And sure, you could do anything, but also it's like, there's not these common understandings like there is in the Thomas Wooden Railway community, where it's like a lot more specific. Like, these are if you make this video, somebody's going to be like, oh, cool, a remake came out, and we're just going to call it that. Like, we all know what that is. We know what a crossover is. Like, that means something. So the point is, like, the reason I embraced the Wooden Railway community was because I was trying to make my videos in HO, and was getting really frustrated because everything I built for my first episode for Pacifics, that like I built a lot of that stuff before I transitioned to Wooden Railway. So I built some A3s in HO, I built some A4s, I built a lot of like necessary stuff. And it wasn't the best. I mean, it would look, anybody who's like, really, committed to HO modeling would just laugh at it, But it was pretty good considering it was all scratch built from cardboard. But it was just, it was infuriating because I was spending forever on these models. And I knew the stories I wanted to tell. Hell, sometimes I just wanted like Molly to be in the background of Tidmus Sheds. And it's like, I'm not going to build a whole HO Molly just to make that happen. And it's like, so I changed course. I said, okay, screw this. I'm going to do Wooden Railway. The Wooden Railway community looks really inviting and fun. And the best part, it's relaxing. It's like it's I have all this stuff already. I have a whole bunch of Wooden Railway. I could just use what I have. And so, anyway, all that to say, I constantly have to restrain myself from doing something more complicated than Wooden Railway, because the reason I got into it in the first place is because it makes me happy, and it gives me an excuse to make something simpler and easier and more fun. And it's easy to say, oh, but I could do this really detailed model with a full wheel arrangement and this and that, and I have all these features I want to implement. And then before I know it, it's overwhelming again. So I always have to hold myself back, and one of the ways I do that is by limiting how many wheels the engines have. Like limiting, like, okay, there's rules for what you can do in Wooden Railway. Like, you can't just make a straight up, full wheel arrangement model of Hank and put it next to Gordon. It won't look right. Like, Gordon looks too simple compared to him. So you either have to make Gordon complicated or you have to make Hank simple. And that's the case for everything. And I find that very appealing, but it also means I have to make a lot of decisions about how to simplify these real engines. Like, you guys have both seen my 3D printed, like, recent models, like the Gordon and the Henley and James.
No,
I was going to mention that. Like, did you go into, like, designing, like, your whole new cast of engines with any sort of, like, specific, like, rules of, like, only this amount of detail, these parts are going to be painted? Yeah. Like, I'm remembering that, like, Edward was one that was a little stylistically different than, like, the other engines.
Right.
But it was still in that same style where it still fit in with the rest.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Well, that's the thing, yeah, because he had, like, the big fenders over the wheels. Like, that's not something Wooden Railway would do. He had, like, the tall funnel. He had, there were some features there that were, like, I made the coal a little bit bigger than Wooden Railway would do, just because I thought it looked cool and, like, it just had a good look to it. But, like, it almost emphasizes his tenders really tiny, so they have to pile the coal higher, because there's not enough, like, space in there for all the coal they actually need. But, like, yeah, I started with Edward, and he's where I broke. Like, I designed that model, like, a year before I actually built it, because I was trying to hold myself back and say, don't make a new Edward, don't make a new Edward, just use the normal Wooden Railway Edward, because the second I make Edward, now I gotta remake the whole cast. And that's what I did. So, like, I made Edward, and I love him because he's, like, I feel like most people picture the TV series Edward, and even the Edward in the Railway series illustrations doesn't look very much like a K2. Like, that's just not, he's never really depicted the way I picture him. And so I wanted to make a specific Edward that did that. And I broke, like, a really crucial rule, which was I made tiny wheels for that. which I for years, I swore I would never make small wheels. Like the rules you're talking about, Ronnie, that was one of my rules for years, is I'm never going to make a wheel size that's smaller than the standard one, because that will open up dangerous new questions. But
yeah.
I did it, and I think with a character like Edward, it's really hard to make a model of Edward in Wooden Railway that has a good-looking wheel arrangement without inventing a new size of wheel, because... Yeah?
Well, that's the thing. Like, high risk, high reward. I mean, it was something...
It's true.
I mean, there's some things that for the longest time I said I was never going to do, or, like, I just didn't think it would look right. But, I mean, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I'm sure it's happened. And it just ended up looking really good, and it's one of my staples in, like, when it comes to my filmmaking or, you know, custom making. I like I said, I'm not huge into custom making. I really only make customs for stuff that, like, I want to make videos for. But, yeah, no, like, I know what you mean, though, Lemmy.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is, like, I really, you know, I do like to kind of push the boundaries, but also I know that pushing the boundaries, hey, it can be dangerous. Like, and it's like what you said earlier. What got me on my models is the fact that, like you mentioned, like, you know, people get on you for not having the right number of wheels on the big boy. And it's like, it's the same thing with when I built Gordon. You know, a lot of people were like, you know, I mean, they looked at, like, my Gordon with the 2 small ones in front and the 4 big ones in the middle and then the 2 small ones in the back. And they're like, you know, oh, he looks too short, you know? Like, Henry looks fine, but Gordon looks too short. And it's because they're looking at those 2 middle wheels, and they're like, well, he should have 6 driving wheels. And it's like, well, yeah, but he's a Wooden Railway model. If I made him that long, he wouldn't make turns. He would look, like, weirdly long compared to the other characters and the coaches. And, like, you know, it just... I have to make those compromises, right?
Exactly.
So,
and
yeah.
If I were to make the big boy, like, with an accurate, and I've seen people that have made, like, wooden big boys. I mean, there's someone on DeviantArt that made one. I think someone on maybe Twitter made one. Oh, I think I saw one on YouTube. And I mean, all power to them. Like, this is not, like, saying that they shouldn't have done this, but their big boys are very long. And I mean, yeah, Big Boy is a huge engine, and and if you just want to make a custom Big Boy for the sake of making it, like, you know, as accurate as possible, yeah, more power to you. I knew right away, though, that I wanted to make a Big Boy that could be used for filming. I mean, it's not sturdy enough for, like, a kid to play with or something like that, so... But
yeah.
And, like, certain stuff like ascending track, it wouldn't make those. Like,
right.
Though it wouldn't make that, but which I don't even use those in my videos anyway. But I knew I wanted it to make, like, turns. I wanted it to look like, obviously I wanted to make it look bigger than most engines, but not, like, super super big, you know. And that was one of the things that came into my mind. I didn't really know how to go about making 4-wheel bogies, because I don't think those were ever made.
No, and also, like, they'd just be too long, full stop, to, like, make curves. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not, like, my big boy is not meant to look as accurate as possible. It's kind of, like, made in the style of, like, a Wooden Railway engine that isn't super detailed, but I mean,
right.
There's enough there for you to know what it is.
Yeah, and that's always, like, yeah, that's my goal too with things, is, like, I don't need every detail. In fact, I want to omit a lot of detail. But what I do want is for somebody to be able to look at the engines I design and be able to hazard a guess as to what class they are. And I think that the 3D printed ones I've done recently, like the Edward, you look at that and you definitely don't think TV series Edward. And if you know a lot about engines, you might even think K2, which would be the hope. You look at Gordon, unfortunately some people look at him and think V2, like Green Arrow. And that's just a product of making an A3 short, is it's going to invoke that. But also then at some point I'll do a V2, which will be even more scrunched, and then people will see the difference. But, you know, like, all those designs, like Henry, like I tried to make him look as much like a Black 5 as possible, but also simplifying things, right? Like, I couldn't have the cab, like, dip down behind the driving wheels because that would have made them too long. So I kind of had to compromise, and the cab, it just stays high. Like, the driving wheels are under the cab, and it's not like wooden railway engines don't have splashers. It's not like they can go up into the running board, right? And on the Black Fives, the cab the rear driving wheels cut into the cab a little bit. So, like, I couldn't do that, and I just decided to just not do that part of the cab and just have them go over. So it's about what do you want to include and what don't you, you know?
Yeah. So I kind of want to take a turn. I mean, we've been talking about a lot of wooden railway stuff, and but I also want to get into like some of the HO stuff. Like, I know specifically, Ronnie, you've made you've made a good amount of HO things. Like, I remember for one of our friends back in the day, you made him a Furness Railway Edward. That was really cool.
Yeah, no.
You know?
That's actually one of my favorite things to do, is to do like I don't want to say like out of the box ideas, but like just ideas you've never really seen before. So I haven't done that in a while, and I'd love to get back into it. But for me, like, custom making is really it's expensive, is what it is, because it's just the medium that I use. But it's also really fun.
Nice.
Sorry, that was unrelated to the custom making. But like, I'm trying to think of a good custom. So I made a Scotsman a while back. I'm still pretty proud of.
That's one of the first things, honestly, I think of when I think of the models you've made. Like, that one is just a stunner. Like, he's...
Yeah, no. But it's a Gordon. I don't think it was a standard. Oh, shoot. I don't want to say I got a Gordon fresh out of the box for it, but I might have. But it was a Gordon, and then 2 Spencer tenders. And 2 Spencer tenders are like $80 anyway, right?
Right.
Like, let's just say, just off the parts store, it's like $40. Maybe that's a little too pricey. But like, it's also the paints that I use, because I usually use like Rust-Oleum paints, spray paints, so I get a better finish on them. And that was kind of a learning curve for a while too. When I started my Thomas, I was kind of trying to figure out what paints to use on it, and I was going to use Tamiya for a while, but then they kept bubbling and like cracks kept showing up, and I got pissed. So I just went for the cheaper stuff.
I did hear recently that it's like it, because everyone I've heard say it says Tamiya, but it's like Tamiya. It makes a lot more sense. Like,
yeah, there's like so many ways to say it. I think I saw a video where like it was actually a Tamiya video, and they said like Tamiya. I don't know.
Tomato.
It's so true,
Henry. I suppose so. But like, I rarely use Tamiya colors now. I used it recently on a Murdoch, and that was such a freaking nightmare. That's done. I will never use those colors ever again. I was deeply considering stripping all the paint off and just using a Rust-Oleum color instead. But I had gotten so far, I was like, I might as well just stick it out.
What was the problem with it? Did it require a lot of coats, or like?
It required a lot of coats, and
because you were going over like a 9F, so it was probably black, right?
Yeah, it was black at first. I had sprayed it with some gray, and then I had done an orange start on it, and it was okay. But because it was the weather was kind of shitty, like the paint wasn't curing properly.
Yeah.
So I tried it at my friend's place, and I ran out of paint. And I was like, damn it.
Was it that it was like it was humid, so it wasn't?
It was. I honestly want to say it was a little cold. I think it was the colder months when I started in.
You know what I never had to worry about back in California before I moved is
good paint conditions.
Yeah, like, you know, it was just always good temperature for the most part. You know, it was always warm and dry, and you know, I never had to worry. You know.
Yeah, that's one of the things. Like, I've never realized, because I've never done something like this myself, but like spray painting stuff outside.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I've never used a spray gun or like spray paint, but yeah, that's something I've never thought about, like going outside to spray paint stuff. Like, we're Thomas users, we don't go outside, so like that's a big change.
That's true. That is true. I actually I live in the cave.
I mean, yeah, this is an interesting thing about custom models, is that you don't, like, I don't know about you guys, but I'm a lot more careless with what I build than what other people build. Like, I mean, if it's something I created, I know I could build it again, I could fix it. So I'm really careless with it, you know? And I notice when I'm showing my models to people, they're so delicate, and I'm like, oh, you don't need to be delicate, it's fine. But like, I'm just so careless with my stuff because it's my stuff. Even if
it's also just a respect thing,
Yeah, if I had broken something that you had made, Lemmy, I'd probably just
it's just
you'd see all the color drain from my face.
It's not really like stuff that you made yourself. I mean, for lack of a better word, might not be as like interesting to you or as special to you because like you're the one that made it. You know how like what went into it, and it's something you made. It's something you're used to seeing all the time. So like you're not really as like delicate or as careful with it. Whereas when we go to meetups and stuff and we see and everyone brings their own customs, or like at train shows or like even entertainment, some people had some of their customs out on their tables, and like they were letting some of the people that were letting them pick up and look at stuff. Obviously, I'm gonna be careful. I don't want to break it.
And that's true.
Yeah, it's a respect thing. I know this person put time and effort into something that looks amazing, and I'm not gonna like jeopardize that by like breaking it or something, or you want to treat it with
that's
respect.
very much part of it.
It's like going into somebody's house. You're like one of your friend's house or somebody's house. You don't want to track dirt on the floor. You don't want to like make a mess.
Yeah, even if they don't care, you still kind of do.
Exactly.
Yeah, no. It's always about oh man,
that's part of it, right? And I think another like that is part of the reason that you might be more careful with somebody else's stuff. But I think like it's also interesting even when other people see me handling my stuff carelessly. Like it sometimes makes them anxious. Like I've got viewers who will see that and be like, and I like I'll give an example is like I'm sure it'll just make people die inside to know that I threw out the vast majority of the buildings from my series back in 2016. Like the first like those 4 episodes, like the Tidmouth station from that sucked. I liked filming, like I liked how it looked, right? But like the roof was made out of like a plastic like floor mat, like that you roll like a desk chair on. So it was heavy as all hell, laying on top of cardboard back before I knew how to build good things out of cardboard structurally. So that roof was heavy. And so I had maybe like 30 seconds like to get shots before the roof caved in, like every time. It was awful. So when I was finally done filming my series, I put the station behind my filming table because there was like a gap between my 4x8 table and the wall. But the thing is, to use the table properly, I kind of needed to walk back there a lot. So my station was just there. So Tidmouth Station, which is probably the most iconic structure from my series next to the sheds, was just sitting on the ground, and I trampled it, like I was, when I was making other stuff on that table, I would just walk over the station. It didn't help that, like, the last shot I got, I don't remember what episode it was for, it was probably the 3rd one, but, like, the last time I filmed with it, I was so pissed at it, I, like, threw it at the wall, and then it, like, kind of slumped down to the ground, like the Family Guy bit where like the frog gets thrown at the wall and then it kind of
jeez.
I just tossed Tidmouth into the wall, and then it was just it broke its back, and then it's sitting there in that condition, and then over the preceding months and years I am just trampling the thing, and eventually I just along with all the other locations which are in a slightly safer corner of the room piled behind the treadmill. I eventually threw all that stuff out just because it was taking up way too much space, because I had progressed past it stylistically where I wasn't going to use it anymore anyway. But like, it's just, that stuff is long gone, is my point. And I feel like somebody else, a lot of other people probably would have like jumped to preserve it, right? Like they would have found nostalgia in it. But for me, I was just like, here's these crumbling structures that weren't built to hold up, and I just kind of wanted to be rid of them. I mean, I kept all the engines, but the buildings are gone.
Think about Thomas and Tuggs. Like, the people... Obviously, we as fans want to preserve those props as much as we can, but obviously the people that made them, or obviously they had like a whole crew working on the models, like, or like scenery and stuff like that. If we had the same like if they had like the same mindsets of us as fans, a lot of the stories wouldn't have been made that are memorable, like the engine, like something in the air. Do you really think if they had a fan's mindset, they'd submerge Henry in water? Like,
well,
no.
that's the thing, right? Like, yeah, I mean, they were rough on the models. There's a reason that every season they had to strip them down to the basics, respray them, reline them. Like, literally, the reason the colors change every season is because, like, they repainted the thing every season. Like, and there's a reason that, I mean, I love season 2, don't get me wrong. I think people dog on it too hard for a few missing eyebrows. But there's a reason that things look a little bit rougher in that season. It's because they didn't really realize they had to refurbish things yet. So, like, in the first season, things look pretty sharp. Second season, those same models come back around, and they're starting to fall apart. They need some serious TLC. That's why you see this big difference in how they look in season 3, is because they were stripped down to the basics. The motors were replaced, and the colors were redone, and the faces were resprayed, and like everything was changed.
At that point, it wasn't their first rodeo. It was their second.
Yeah.
It was their second rodeo, and they knew what they had to do to like get the models to tip-top shape for the next season.
No, exactly. Yeah, and they did that many more times, which is why season 4 looks a little different. Season 5 looks a little different. Season 6 looks a lot different, and they kept doing that over the years. And so, the point being, though, those models are iconic. Like, think about it. Like, Thomas, the original, like, we don't really know where the original Perspex Thomas is, so I'll give a better example. Like, Edward. We have the original Edward. Like, the Tank Merch guys have it.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't look like the one in Edward's Day Out. Like, you look at it, and it's like, I mean, it's the new series Edward, and it's beautiful. It's really great we have it, but they just took the original Edward's Day Out Edward, and they turned it into something that looked very, very different. The face looks different, the color looks different of the body, everything's different. And that's kind of wild. No fan would ever do that to that model. They would never change it from season 1 condition, let alone change it to 5 other conditions until it got to what it is today.
Yeah.
But the people who made those models, they were just tools, and they used them as such. Mm-hmm. And I do the same thing with my stuff. So
that's kind of how I feel. I guess my question is, how often do you guys, if ever, redo a custom, like, paint-wise? Like, you look at it, and, like, the build is fine, but you're also like, I could probably touch up some stuff. Like,
it's interesting because, well, you go ahead, Henry.
Well, I've done that a few times with Big Boy. Obviously, each Rails of the West episode so far, in all 3 episodes that are out as of now, it's a different Big Boy. The first episode was a 4,000. The second one was 4,005, and then the third one is 4,012. So obviously, I paint over where it says that on the cab and do the next number. But I also do like a different face for each one, and it's kind of I do it in a different way each time, or at least I have so far. But then I also touch up like the boiler and the wheels, and like there was actually a point in between episode 2 and 3, which was like a 3-year gap. Like the cow catcher thing broke off, but I was able to just glue it back on with wood glue. And,
right.
And that's one of the things, I guess, like, and also in between 2 and 3, I had, because my fiance is really good with, like, painting and stuff like that, and I had her paint the number and the Union. I had her redo the Union Pacific on the tender, which at that point was 4 years old, because I did it back in like 2019, 2020, and she did a way better job than I could have ever done. And then she also did that with like 4520 and 5511, which were characters in the episode 3. But yeah, and to add on to that, like you were saying, like you said, Ronnie, like with the model, it's like saying the shape is fine, but having to touch it up. There are times where I do kind of want to if I keep focusing on the Big Boy for Rails of the West, I would like to either redo that model or just make a whole new one from scratch, because like I said, that model is basically 5 or 6 years old at this point, and it's it's a little
that
outdated.
Is horrifying to think about.
Yeah.
5 or 6 years ago when you made that.
Yeah,
that
you're kind of like you're reaching the point that the show reached where they're like, we're just gonna make brass models.
I was just thinking about that as I was saying it.
Like that's the thing, right? It's like it's worn down enough. You probably want just a new one. I mean, it's still serving its purpose, but I could see the appeal. I mean, your question though, Ronnie, about like how often do we retouch models or repaint them outright? I can tell you there's certainly been occasions where I wish I did.
Mm-hmm.
I can't like there was like a Tugs model I built 10 years ago at this point, a long time ago, where I think it was when I made Blue Nose, and not the Blue Nose that like some people are familiar with. It's like much longer ago. It was a smaller model, maybe a foot long. Mm-hmm. And I made it too blue. Like I kind of accentuated that because he's gray. He's straight up like a light gray in the show. But like he's called Blue Nose. You kind of feel the need to kind of make him a little bit bluer. So instead of giving him Battleship Gray, I kind of gave him a blue tint. And I just looking at that. And this is a phenomenon when you're making models in general. Like you look at it and you squint, and you're like, that's fine. Yeah, no, that's the right color. Yeah,
you're coping. You're like, yes,
exactly.
This is perfect because like you don't want to do it again.
Exactly. Yeah. So you justify it to yourself, right? So I did that, and look, folks, if you are doing that, it's the wrong color. I'm sorry. Like, if you're not. I mean, look, it's at least in my case, right? I'll typically know right away once I paint the thing and look at it, and it's dry, and I'm still thinking, I think that's the right color. It's not. I mean, maybe it is. Maybe it's accurate to the show or whatever, but you don't like it, which is why you keep thinking that and trying to justify it. Like when something's the right color, you just know and you move along. Yeah. And so the problem with Blue Nose is it was, I kind of justified it and moved along. Then I made Grampus, who's also Blue Nose's color, but doesn't have blue in the name. So when I made Grampus, I was like, oh God, they have to match, and this is the wrong color. Like, it is not right, Like, I was looking at it like, this is a very blue-gray. And Grampus doesn't have an ounce of blue on him. It's all gray. Like, and that means that Blue Nose is all gray, too. And so then but anyway, I didn't repaint them. I just bit the bullet and just made them both that color and moved on. But that'll happen where you're so far along you really don't want to backtrack. And you know what? Sometimes you shouldn't. A lot of the time, honestly, sometimes you should just cut your losses and say, look, this isn't perfect, but it's good, But also don't lie to yourself, If you don't like the color, you don't like the color. Maybe it's still worth it anyway. Maybe it's still a good model and you're just willing to accept that it's not perfect. But that doesn't mean you like the color. You may not. So, that's something I've had to learn. I mean, usually it's, I'll do that, yeah.
It is coloring, especially because, at least with Thomas, like the show lights at a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of brightness. And also there's the restored versions where, like, sometimes they look a little different. There's a lot of scenarios on, like, what is the right color. And even if you use, like, the exact show color, like, it looks weird to your eye. So I decided long ago that I'm just going to pick a color that I think looks like how I would view it. And whether
that's
or not...
my approach too. Like, because look, like, I realized this when I went to, like, the Project Tiger Moth kind of premiere, and the models were, like, at Edison, and I realized, I saw how dark blue Thomas was, and, like, and Percy, and, like, the faces were a really dark gray, and they looked totally natural and correct to season 5 on screen. Mm-hmm. But, like, in person, they were so dark. And at that moment, I realized, oh, you've got to make a choice. Do you want the model to look right at shows and in your house and on a day-to-day basis and under regular lighting? Or do you want the model to look accurate to the show, as in, like, under, like, film grade, Hollywood grade, like, bright lights, does it look correct, right?
Yeah.
And for Tiger Moth, it's that the second one was correct. Like, it's because they had the budget for that. They did go ahead and make something that was that extravagant. And I mean, honestly, this fits the topic of the video, because as beautiful and super accurate as those models are, they are still kind of customs when you think about it. Like, they're fan-made models that are made from scratch that, you know, represent something in the show that aren't screen used, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of like the you know, the epitome of it. But you got to make a choice about, are you going to make it look good day to day, or are you going to make it look good under the same circumstances at the show? And the thing is, the vast majority of us are not going to put it under studio lighting. Like, we're going to, like, take it to a show, take it to somebody's house and say, look what I made, and it's really cool. And in that case, I give Thomas a much brighter blue.
Right.
One that would look like a pale, like, powder blue under the Shepperton lights, but looks normal anywhere else, you know?
Custom make it's hard, dude.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of different ways to do things. And, like, kind of bringing it back a little bit to, like, the beginning, where it's like there's so many different, like, new ways to do it. Like, when I got my resin printer, like, that was like a huge moment, because for the most part, before then, if I needed something 3D printed, I used it off of Shapeways, and that was expensive and it was time consuming.
And you didn't have a lot of control either.
Yeah, no, I didn't have a lot of control. If something were to get messed up or broken, I'd just buy it again, you know, and just bite the bullet if, like, oh, hopefully it doesn't blow up again. But now it's like, if something messes up, I'm like, ah, shit, let me clean out the printer and do it again.
Right.
You know
Yeah. It is so liberating. Like, I mean, I haven't used resin yet. I think it's only a matter of time. But I love having a PLA printer. But it took me a long time to come around to it. I mean, because I really... You know, I take a lot of pride in making things with my own two hands.
For the longest time, Lemmy, you were the cardboard master. You still are. But
well, yeah, he still is. Hold on.
I've noticed that that's something I definitely noticed, like, especially in these recent years. You've gone from, I mean, yeah, you still make, you know, a lot of stuff from scratch, like that Kirk Ronan that's, like, for, like the hat with of being a, Winter Railway destination in mind, like, that's great, and that was completely from scratch. But then there's a lot of your like we were talking earlier, like your Edward, like your newer, like, style, your newer, more recent customs of, like, the main engines. A lot of that uses, like, 3D prints and stuff like that.
No, it's true. And it's like, it took me a really long time to overcome my pride and make that switch, because I mean, it's like, I didn't want to automate what I was so proud of doing myself, right? Like, you don't realize how many... I made at least 100 sets of cardboard wheels. That you know, a single set would take like 10 or 15 minutes. And I spent, I mean, years making all the wheels from cardboard. And it's a pity because I didn't produce, like, I would say a solid 90% of the models I've ever made. Never made it into a video, or never shown publicly. You know, you guys have seen a lot more of it than the public has. But, like, it's, you know, a lot of that stuff is just, like, you know, I never actually released videos of it. So when I talk about, like, building, like, the cardboard wheels, I'm not even talking, like, my 2016 series. I mean, it was a little bit more complicated, the method, because I was using paper clips for the axles instead of, like, what I was using before. Point is, it was a lot of work to make the engines from scratch out of cardboard, and also it wasn't repeatable. You make one model, congrats, you've made one model, but that's it. But if you design a model in SketchUp, which is what I use, you know, it's you've made infinite models, because you can just let her rip, you know, just print out as many as you want. And sure, there are steps to it, you know, like, I don't just print the whole thing in one go. I print the boiler separately and the running board separately, and it all slots together later. But it's really, really repeatable, and then you can have, you know, 10 of something. You can, if you want to have a story where you see all of Gordon's brothers together, you can do that really easily with 3D printing. And that consistency and that reliability and the way it scales, where once you've put in the effort, now it's a lot easier going forward, that's very, very appealing. But I knew once I had a 3D printer, I was never going to make models the same way again. I would be relying on it to make... Like, I was never going to make a funnel again. I was never going to make a dome again. I was never going to make buffers again. Those are things that I would never see the point in wasting time on, making them from scratch. You know, it was always going to be a printer. And it took me a long time to accept that because, I was intimately familiar with those processes and I loved those processes. And sure, they took up a lot of time, but also they were something I was proud of. And there's something so cool, and I still think there's something so cool about holding out something that makes somebody's jaw drop and telling them I made that out of trash for 5 cents. That is the coolest thing in the world. It makes me feel so proud. And I can't quite say that with a 3D printer. I say, oh, well, I made it with like 15 cents worth of filament and like a $200 investment up front. Like that's not nearly as much of a mic drop, Yeah, no. So that's why it took me so long to finally embrace 3D printing. But once I did, it made things a lot easier. I still use cardboard a lot for anything bigger than like, I don't know, like a large-sized engine. Like buildings, I make them all out of cardboard.
Yeah, no, there are things that like cardboard is like just, it's not even that it's easier, but it's cheaper. Like, imagine
it's cheaper.
Like PLA printing like a building, that'd be awful, and it would take forever. Oh
gosh, yeah.
Well, it's like what Alex, the famous 8, does, where he prints everything with I think it's resin, and he just like, I mean, that must cost a fortune, but also just, and I think he also uses a lot of plastic card from what I've seen.
I think he does PLA. I think.
Yeah, is it?
Yeah,
really?
I think it is because you can do buildings in resin, but depending on how thin your walls are, it's gonna warp inward and probably combust immediately. I think PLA is way stronger, and I think
I'm pretty sure he uses both for different applications.
Yeah,
so
no. I think he uses resin for the faces probably, because faces you have to do in resin. You can do them in PLA, but they're gonna look bad. I'm just gonna say what it is.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? I mean, it's very limited, and I think that to get something that looks really smooth and natural and organic, resin's the way to go.
Yes.
But I mean, that's the thing. It's like for what I do, especially making wooden railway models, it's like a cheat code, It just you just zip through the process, and then, I mean, it still very consistently takes me 3 days to make a PLA printed engine, and it actually doesn't matter if I'm working those days or not. Like it's weird. Like no matter how busy I am, it always takes 3 days. And it's, even if I've done 95% of the engine on the first day, it takes me 3 days. Like I'm gonna finish it on the third day, even though there's only 5% left. So there's just something about it. It's a good rule of thumb. It's like you write a script, and you know that in script format, a single page equates to a single minute of screen time. And you would think, well, the number of words is different. The number, not every page is created equal. How can that possibly be? When sometimes you just have a line that says beat, and other times you have a line that is a long monologue with Thomas taking up the whole stretch. How is it possible that it's consistent, but it just averages out, And so I always spend 3 days making a 3D printed engine, which is a good turnaround, honestly. I mean, I could tell you it was more like 5 days when I would make them from scratch out of cardboard. And, I mean, it's very liberating, but I'm still never going to leave cardboard behind. I think a lot of people will look down on a material because because it doesn't cost something, right? Because it's not expensive.
Yeah.
And I mean, I understand that you do get fantastic results if you buy expensive materials. There's a reason they exist. But also, I do relish in building something extremely cheap and then watching people's jaws drop as I tell them that it cost me nothing. That is that is kind of a driving force for me, using that material, and of course saving money, and just I don't want to spend money on a material I don't need. Just if I don't want to spend like $5 on a single sheet of plastic card when I could just take like a Amazon box and use it for the same thing, and as long as I paint it right and prepare it right and like kind of cover all the seams and use like Mod Podge and stuff to kind of cover seams, people will never know the difference. If I can do a cheap version, especially for something that's only going to be seen on screen and nobody's going to hold in their hands, nobody can verify what it's made of, hell yeah. Like I'm going to use cardboard every time, so that's why I use it.
That's a cool thing, man. Like that's...
What is your favorite custom you've made, Lemmy?
That's a difficult question.
Like if you had to pick one. Like, it can be recent, it can be new.
Dude, Red Rail was pretty good.
Oh, yeah, thanks.
I think the pirate engines were really fun. Especially because they weren't I mean, I'm not too sure if they were based on any specific basis.
No, they weren't based on anything.
They were just so fun, like to design. I bet just like
I wanted Red Rail to look like she had like a kind of a captain, like a pirate captain's kind of like collar thing happening.
Yeah,
so
I know.
So I just kind of designed it that way with no justification, and I love it. You know,
that's awesome. I love stuff like that.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I had a blast with those designs. Red Rail most of all, but yeah, I mean those were honestly pretty shoddy in terms of like the build quality. Like I didn't put any Mod Podge on them. I drew on all the like the panels instead of like, because I mean these days when I make a model, I make it pretty refined. I'll 3D print the thing. I'll print on like a, you know, I can't ever remember for the life of me if I have an inkjet or a laser. I think I have an inkjet.
You did put clay in them to like add some weight.
That is true,
which is good.
I did do. Well, I'm not sure. Actually, I don't. No, I didn't do that with Red Rail. I don't think.
Oh, you did?
I do that with the vast. Yeah, I do that with the vast majority of my models at this point. You are right, but with her in particular, that's what I mean about her being shoddy. Is that I put her on an existing wooden railway chassis to save time. And her and Snapper was just like, she was just a repaint of like an '08, and Seahorse was same as Red Rail. Like I'm pretty sure I built that whole body and put it on a chassis, but I was just trying to make that thing quick because I just hadn't gotten something out in so long, and I just wanted to make a video that I enjoyed, and so I decided to just screw it. I'm just gonna make these models as simply as possible, and so they're very reminiscent of how I made models back in 2016, and that they're just as kind of shoddy, for lack of a better word.
Right.
But the designs are really good, and that's really what sticks out. Is it's not so much about how refined it is. It's not so much about like the precision. It's about is it novel? Does it stick in people's minds? Because the thing is, I mean, my dad says this sometimes. He says he remembers like video games from the 90s, and then he sees them today and he's like, oh, it looks horrible. But like, he didn't think of like how pixelized they were back then. He just thought of the concept.
Well, not only that, but TVs back then weren't as like high definition. Like if you play like a Super Nintendo or NES game like on an old CRTV, it's not gonna look like as like pixelated or grainy as it would be like on a HD smart TV that you have now.
No, exactly.
They would use that to their advantage back in the day. They'd use a thing called dithering, where it's like one pixel is a color and the next one isn't, in like a checkerboard sequence, but they'd be really small. So on a CRT, it would look like a see-through color.
Yeah, no, that's really clever, honestly.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's the thing, is it's, honestly, there's a lot of, like, actual, like, master paintings from, like, hundreds of years ago that if you put a magnifying glass on them, the way the pigments mix together, like, it's not so much that, I mean, the way a lot of paint works, it doesn't, like, there's not some chemical reaction and blue and red mix together and make purple. It's just millions of tiny, tiny blue and red fragments mixed together so much that you perceive it as purple from a distance. But if you zoom in on it, it's not purple, it's blue and red. And, some paints work like that, but, it's the same kind of notion there. And I think, anyway, so that being said, like, I just, what is my favorite? What is the best model I've ever built? I really liked the James I built that I put in the thumbnail of the token.
That static model?
I have been meaning to ask you for months if that's like a drawing.
Oh, dude!
Like a model.
That's cool.
Yeah. No, he's really cool. I like him a lot. I never published him outside of that thumbnail.
Oh.
I'll show you guys.
Yeah, no, you should send a picture, because I've been wanting to know for like ever if that's like, I thought it was like a drawing, like a really good like illustration. To be honest,
I kind of wanted people to think that. Yeah, but I'll show you guys. I don't think I'll publish it publicly just because I like. Yeah. I mean, it's done the rounds a little bit, but like, because I brought it to Edison and then people published it. But it's nice to keep some things kind of to myself. I mean, and to friends. And it's like, I kind of like the notion of like that one in particular. It wasn't for the token, it was just for me. I just wanted to make James because I like James. And it's a cool one because it free rolls, which is really fun. The face I'm really, really happy with. It's like just my perfect James face. The color is really vibrant. Because I used like a glass paint instead of like the Craftsmart and Apple Barrel paints I typically use. So I was really happy with that one. There's, what else is there? There's I'd say that like that October, I think that was the October of 2022, I think, or maybe 2021. I think that was... No, that was the October of 2021. I made some cool models. Like, I also made a 10 cents that I would really love. And that model's, like, smaller than the show scale. It's, like, maybe a foot long. And it has the entire hole. It doesn't cut off at the water line. And it's got, like, it's painted red underneath the water line, like real tugboats are.
Yeah.
But, like, the ones on tugs never have that. So I thought, let me put that on a model. It looked really good. It balanced out the red from the stack really nicely. I gave him like bright blue eyes instead of the black ones. And the kicker is that this model, it runs like clockwork. It's got such a good mechanism because it you can disassemble the thing so easily. I gave it moving eyes and head, which was hard to do because it's tiny. Like with the tugs models on the show, everything's in the head. There's a lot of room in there. But this model was so small, I had to do a thing where I created this like shaft that was mounted at the bottom of the hull that translated the motion up into the head. And the problem with that is that like you have to there's a deck in between those. Like now it's separated. So if you want to take the model apart, well, the head has to come off of the shaft. And that's a tricky thing to pull off. So basically the shaft was made in such a way that the head slotted into it and kind of got like firm, and then it would rotate with the servo being at the very bottom of the hull. So it was a very it's a complicated mechanism to describe, but it comes apart and goes back together so elegantly. And at this point, like, I'll coat anything that has to be disassembled in Mod Podge. Really, I'll coat the whole model in Mod Podge, but especially things that need to be disassembled. And then I'll even put like a bit of Vaseline on components so they don't stick. And then I'll just have this thing that comes apart really nicely when I need it to. I'll make switches accessible. Because I've been doing RC stuff for like, at this point, I feel like it's been maybe 6... It's been like 8 years at this point that I've been doing RC stuff. So I've gotten used to like when it's annoying to not be able to take the deck off or not be able to remove the face properly or switch out the eye plate or like put the receiver in a bad spot where you can't unplug it. So I've gotten used to all that stuff. But yeah, I think that's up there. I think that 10 cents I built is one I'm really, really happy with because it's a well-oiled machine. It's really beautiful. It was creatively experimental in terms of the colors I used and the stylistic decisions I made. The face was gray too, and it had like eyebrows. Like that's not tugs, that you don't typically do that. But
yeah,
that one,
Yahoo.
I love that one. Yeah. So that's probably what I'd pick.
What about you, Henry?
Probably Big Boy. I mean, it's definitely my most prominent like custom that I've made.
Oh, it's iconic.
Yeah, it's I guess like second place would probably be, I mean, not including like my American series. I mean, granted, I haven't made a whole lot outside of it, but I really like the Gentian Pug I made in like 2018. Those were neat.
Those are just some like classic like style customs. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
I desperately wanted a wooden railway Gentian Pug as a kid. Like, I really wanted those two.
Lemmy, I have some bad news. They didn't make Gentian Pug and wooden railway.
Dude, this is almost as worse as finding out Sam's not real.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Lemmy.
Wait, what?
They never made Gentian Pug and wooden railway.
But I have so many vivid memories of playing with them.
That's the NyQuil. That's the NyQuil.
Yeah. Well, I guess, Ronnie, we can go on to you. What's your favorite custom?
Scotsman's up there. As much as I really hated making him, Murdoch looks pretty nice.
Nice.
He looks pretty good. Arthur looks really good. I think my most recent ones I've been really hitting my stride with. Mike Thomas is probably my favorite one, though, because I think he just looks really nice.
He's a season 3 dude,
I mean, it's honestly a good sign when Thomas is your favorite, because he kind of, like, he should be the best. You know, he's front and center.
He's kind of like the baseline when I kind of base everybody else off of, because he's been redone like 4 or 5 times now. The new Annie and Claire I'm really excited with, though, too. Those looked good.
Yeah?
And they had the little lights on them.
Oh, nice. Yeah. No, those are... I remember when you were just talking about the concept for them and how you were going to do it. And I think taking, like, the actual, like... Taking just a genuine release of that, like, general basis of Coach and repainting it, it just has, like, a little bit more detail on there and a little bit more depth that makes them look so pretty. Like...
Yeah, no.
I guess, like, to wrap it up, we could do one more topic. I think we could... do one more. What are some customs that, like, you've had planned, but, like, you just never got around to doing, or you decided to cancel it? You know, stuff like that.
I've had a green arrow on the tank for.
I know, Lemmy, you have like a lot, but
well, I'll approach this question differently than how I'm inclined to. I'm inclined to answer. I have devised and half written like 20 different films that all required models that I built or planned to build and didn't make. But we'll be here all day. So I'm gonna say, like, there are ones that I just kind of have wanted to make but have had no excuse to make, and I think that's how I'll interpret the question.
Sure.
It's like, you know, and so I think that, like, there's a lot. It's honestly every day I think, ooh, this would be a really cool thing to make. And sometimes I go ahead and do it, you know. Like, recently I made... Like, I showed you guys the Thomas and Bear I did recently, did I?
I think. Maybe.
The big one? The big one?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I saw the big one. I think you put it on...
Yeah. Yeah. So I made a big bear, and also Thomas. You might not have seen Thomas. But, you know, like, those were just random. Like, they didn't have anything to do with anything. Like... There's a lot of models I've thought of making. Sometimes I think it'd be cool just to make, like, a Gauge 1 model, like... I've gotten very close to making a Gauge 1 Edward many times. I started a Gauge 1 Diesel, but I only got as far as the chassis, which was an achievement, because it actually works pretty well, and it's all 3D printed gears and stuff, and it works. But it's like... I don't know, like, there's a lot of things. I've always wanted to make a Vienna, like a big ocean liner. And I'm talking huge. Like, I might even do like a real one, like the Olympic or something.
Like a life-size one that we can go on and float in?
Yeah. No, yeah, exactly.
Nice. That's cool. I mean, I know you're good at making stuff with cardboard, Lemmy, but I don't know if I would feel safe doing that.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. I'd be scared. But
3D print? Yeah, sure. But...
Oh, wow.
We'll have to use resin.
I guess the only custom that comes to mind that, like, I haven't really gotten around to that I did plan on making is like, I mean, it's not Thomas, but it's JJ the jet plane. And I got, like, they made those wooden planes back in, like, the early 2000s, and I bought an extra JJ that's kind of scuffed up with the intention of painting it, like, reddish brown, like he was in the model series. And I mean, it was just going to be pretty simple. I would use, like, a reddish brown and paint them, and then redo the windows, and I thought that'd be cool. I just haven't really gotten around to it, and I don't know if I would really use it for a video. I've done some Theodore stuff. I haven't done, I've never done any JJ stuff, though, even though I have a couple planes. I've used them in the background.
If anybody's going to do it, it's going to be you, Henry.
Yeah.
Like, I would,
no disrespect,
I'd love to see it.
JJ got no fans.
Yeah.
It's true.
That's true. But, I mean, for me personally, I've always liked the model series more than the CGI series.
I feel like to more of a degree with you, because I think there are fewer people who are into JJ, but it's a bit like how I feel about Tugs, where I'm really, really, really into it, and everybody else, like, there are other people who are into it, but for the most part, like, I feel like if somebody's gonna sit down and do, like, a big, like, Tugs production, I'm one of the more likely people to do it, because, you know, most people are not going to invest the time in Tugs.
I could see
it's kind of the same thing with JJ.
Yeah, honestly, I could see myself doing like a Theodore Tugboat production more so than JJ, just
Dude, I
because.
love Theodore.
Yeah, I know I have a good amount of Theodore stuff, and it would. I mean, not that I'd have it down to like strategy, but I could see myself being able to like film stuff with boats better than with airplanes, because a lot of
Yeah.
that stuff would be, a lot of the scenes would just be me hanging a plane on the string going through the sky backdrop, and it's like that'd be
You're
silly.
right.
Whereas making the big harbor would actually be fun, and I think would be possible.
That
But,
would be really
yeah.
cool, honestly.
Yeah, no,
Like,
it's hard to make model planes look like they're actually flying. Like practically, it's very difficult.
Right.
yeah, it's about where you attach the string, and even then, like hiding the string is next to impossible. It's like, it's you could use green screen and have them on like a pole, but it's tricky. I mean, it's a very difficult thing to do technically. So,
And also another thing about that is, if I were to do a JJ production, I would want it to want it to be more based on the model series than the CGI series, just because that's what I was more accustomed to as a kid, and I don't know, I think there's more of a substance to those stories as opposed to the CGI stories. Like,
Yeah.
not only that, but like with the CGI series, like the wings, like they would flap their wings like a bird and stuff, and it was like I couldn't do that. That'd be hard.
yeah, no, it's more limited certainly, but yeah, for sure.
Man, customs are cool.
They're good for your colon, essentially.
I gotta
Yeah.
make more of those because I feel very happy when I'm making them until the part that sucks, and then I'm like, this sucks.
There's always a part that sucks.
Yeah.
I mean, it is interesting though. Like I mean, obviously the title of this is customs, but I never call my models customs. Like,
What do you call
I mean,
them?
I call them models.
Whoa!
I mean,
That's cool.
I know, but it's interesting because I feel like a custom. I mean, like, for the purposes of this video, it makes sense to extend it, because if we're talking exclusively about customs, honestly, I wouldn't have very much to talk about. It'd be like Snapper from A Salty Story, because there's not that many models that I've straight up just repainted or customized. Like, to customize something is kind of like to take an existing thing and alter it. And I honestly very rarely do that. Usually I make things from scratch. And so the way I always like to describe them is models. This is a model I built, And it's like, because I'm in the wooden railway community, I feel like that's another one of those traditions, right? Is the name, like, like this is a custom. Like, that's just, we throw that around. Like, that just means it's a representation of a character or a location that isn't a brand purchasable item, And so it applies to everything. But I will say, I definitely consider what I make to be models and not customs.
That's fair.
And
I
customs
respect
are,
that.
Yeah.
Lemmy. I respect that big time.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. But also, like, customs are awesome. It's just not applicable to what I do.
Yeah,
but
I get it.
every now and then it is,
I'm proud of you.
Dude,
Me too,
I'm
Henry.
proud of all of us here.
Yeah,
except for
we
me.
just-
I'm not proud of me, but I'm proud of my buddies. I'm proud of my buddies.
I'm proud of us too. We
No,
got.
we'll be
this-
doubly proud for you, Ronnie.
Thank
but then,
you, chum.
We got.
Well,
this-
actually, no. But then that would be 4 times the pride, and that wouldn't be quite a shit.
You know what,
That wouldn't make up
here's-
for your.
here's
We are
the thing.
each 1.5 proud of you. There
Here's
we go.
the thing, Lemmy. Pride comes before a fall.
we got this podcast to a whole second episode, so that's pretty.
That's true.
That's a big
That's good.
accomplishment. But with that,
For the
It
being
is a
said-
whole
episode.
second episode.
With that
We're
being
gonna have
said,
to have some crazy gimmick.
yeah, at least.
We'll
at
resort
least-
to that next
Yeah,
time.
no, next
In the
episode.
bottom corner,
we will.
we're gonna have a kill
but-
cam of all like Call of Duty footage in the background.
Yeah. With that being said, I think we're ready to wrap this episode up. I just said that wrong. I'm sorry. I should have stopped
it's
talking.
it's
Henry.
okay. We forgive you entirely.
All right.
Henry. Alright.
All right. Well, I guess I'll go ahead and do the outro. If you guys have any ideas for customs, stories, or any content in general, go for it. Even if like you're not sure if you're going to be good enough at it. I mean, practice makes perfect. Go for it. Just remember to keep things one chuff at a time. Thanks for watching, guys.
Bye.
Yep. Thanks for tuning in. Go be creative,
God bless you all.
and good night.